Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to cut through the noise and really focus on the big strategic shifts that are reshaping our world.
And today, we've got a huge one.
Absolutely. We're talking about something that sounds almost sci-fi, but it's happening right now. It's the technological death of isolation.
That's a great way to put it.
We're diving into how global connectivity is hitting planetary scale at, frankly, unprecedented speed. And specifically, how satellites are poised to just erase the whole idea of a dead zone.
Yeah, that feeling of no signal. It's on its way out. Soon it'll sound as old-fashioned as talking about a dial-up modem or a fax machine.
Exactly. And this isn't just about better signals. It fundamentally changes the device you're probably holding right now or listening to us on.
It really is a paradigm shift. We're stepping into an era of, let's call it ubiquitous connectivity. And the spearhead for this is Starlink's Direct-to-Cell technology. Its rapid rollout, the tech getting better and better. Right. And for you listening, this deep dive isn't just, faster internet. It's a look under the hood at the future of global communication infrastructure. And crucially, this massive $17 billion deal that just hit the accelerator hard, pushing us into the 5G from space era.
Okay, let's tackle the elephant in the room first, because there's a lot of confusion out there. People hear Starlink smartphones and they picture what? Some kind of rugged SpaceX branded brick.
Hey, yeah, that's the first thing we absolutely have to clear up. It's totally wrong. SpaceX isn't making phones. They have zero interest. Musk himself joked about it, didn't he? Something like, building phones makes me want to die.
Right, I remember that. So what is it then? What is direct-to-cell or D2C?
It's purely a network capability upgrade. That's the key. It takes the phone you already have, assuming it's a reasonably modern LTE phone like an iPhone 15, 16, a Pixel 9, 10, whatever.
Your standard smartphone.
Your standard unmodified smartphone. And it gives that phone the ability to talk directly to Starlink satellites flying overhead in low Earth orbit. No new hardware needed on the phone itself.
So Starlink's basically putting cell towers in space, and our phones just connect to them like any other tower, just higher up.
That's precisely the concept. Orbiting cell towers. And our mission today is, well, it's a bit complex because this whole shift is happening in layers, you see.
Okay, break it down for us.
First, layer one. We need to get real about the tech as it stands right now, late 2025. What can it actually do? What are the limits? The current reality.
Got it, phase one.
Then layer two, we absolutely have to dive deep into that $17 billion spectrum deal announced last month. Because that deal, it changes the entire strategic landscape. It's massive.
The catalyst for what comes next.
Exactly. And finally, layer three. We need to explore the more philosophical side, the design implications. What does planetary connectivity actually mean for the future of the smartphone itself? Does the screen even matter as much anymore?
Fascinating. And maybe the most important point up front, this isn't some far-off future thing. It's already rolling out.
Absolutely not vaporware. The sources are clear. Phase one, this initial capability, has been live since July, August 2025. T-Mobile's partnership in the U.S. is active.
And internationally, too.
Yep. 1NZ in New Zealand was the first international launch partner, which makes sense given their geography. And KDDI in Japan quickly followed. So the foundation, it's already poured.
Okay, foundation laid. Let's build on that. Talk us through phase one, the spaceborne cell tower. How does this actually work technically?
Right, the foundation's there, but the engineering hurdles they cleared for phase one are, frankly, astonishing.
Yeah.
Let's dig into the architecture. How do these satellites act like cell towers? The genius here involves solving two big, seemingly opposite problems. Dealing with the satellite's altitude and speed, and making it work with existing phone hardware.
Let's start with the altitude. You mentioned low Earth orbit, LEO. That's around 550 kilometers up, give or take. Why not go higher, like traditional communication satellites in geostationary orbit?
It all comes down to latency, the delay, and power. Geostationary satellites are way out there, about 35,000 kilometers. The time it takes a signal to travel that far and back creates significant lag. We're talking 500 milliseconds, maybe even a full second or more. That makes real-time stuff like voice calls or even snappy data feel sluggish.
Okay, so LEO brings them closer.
Much closer. By being down at 550 kilometers, Starlink slashes that latency dramatically. You still have some delay, we'll get into that. But it's low enough to make essential communications practical, especially considering the very weak radio signals coming from a standard phone. Your phone wasn't designed to shout 35,000 kilometers into space.
Makes sense. Closer is better for responsiveness. But wait, if they're in LEO, aren't they moving incredibly fast, like thousands of miles per hour relative to the ground?
They are, around 17,000 miles per hour, which creates a whole different challenge. How do you maintain a stable connection between a fast-moving satellite and a tiny, relatively weak phone signal on the ground, especially when the phone itself might also be moving?
Yeah, how do they do that? Seems impossible.
That's where the really clever hardware comes in. Each DDC-capable Starlink satellite is packed with specialized gear. The core is something called an eNode B modem.
eNode B sounds technical.
It is, but think of it like this. An eNode B is essentially the brain of a normal 4G cell tower you see on the street. It's the base station computer that handles all the signal processing, authenticating users, managing connections, routing data, all that complex stuff.
Okay, the smarts of a cell tower.
Exactly. Starlink basically took that entire functionality, miniaturized it, hardened it to survive the radiation and vacuum of space, and optimized it to work with extremely low power signals in zero atmosphere. It's literally a custom-built, space-proof cell tower computer flying overhead.
Wow. Okay, so the brain is up there. What about the ears? How does it pick out my specific phone signal from potentially thousands of others nearby as it zooms past?
That's the magic of the phased array antennas. This is arguably the key technological enabler. These aren't like traditional dish antennas that physically move. Phased arrays steer their beams electronically.
Electronically?
Yeah. By precisely controlling the timing and phase of the radio signals sent to many small antenna elements, they can form and steer thousands of very narrow, highly focused beams simultaneously. Imagine instead of one big floodlight covering a whole area, you have thousands of tiny, powerful laser pointers. Or maybe moving spotlights is a better analogy.
Okay, thousands of spotlights.
And these spotlights, these beams, are constantly moving, dynamically tracking individual users on the ground as the satellite flies over. So the satellite can focus just on the weak signal from your phone, create a dedicated link, and filter out interference from everything else around it. It's an incredible feat of radio engineering, managing Doppler shifts from the speed, compensating for atmospheric effects, all while locked onto potentially thousands of users.
That is seriously impressive. And the final piece of the puzzle, the reason my current phone can even talk to this space tower without needing new bits inside, that's the frequency, right?
Absolutely crucial. This wouldn't work without it. Starlink's D2C service operates on standard, licensed LTE bands. Specifically, in the U.S. partnership with T-Mobile, they're using a slice of T-Mobile's PCS spectrum. That's around 1.9 gigahertz.
Frequencies my phone already knows.
Precisely. Because it's a standard LTE band that almost every modern smartphone is already built to transmit and receive on, you don't need any special hardware modifications. No new antennas, no new chips in your phone. Your phone's existing modem just sees the satellite as another potential T-Mobile cell site, a very fast-moving, distant one, but fundamentally just another cell site.
Okay, let's walk through the experience. Say I'm hiking, I go over a ridge, lose my normal T-Mobile signal. What happens on my phone screen? How does my "help I'm lost" text actually get out?
The handover process is designed to be pretty seamless, mimicking how your phone switches between terrestrial towers. When your phone's modem realizes it can't reach a ground-based tower anymore, its internal software automatically starts scanning for other available signals it understands.
Looking for anything it recognizes.
Right. And if a DTC-enabled Starlink satellite happens to be overhead and within range, your phone will detect its LTE signal broadcasting in that T-Mobile PCS band. It'll lock onto it just like it would any other tower.
And I might see something different on my phone?
Probably. The specifics might vary by phone and carrier, but you'll likely see some indicator. Maybe a small satellite icon appears in your status bar, or the network name might change to something like T-Mobile via satellite or T-Mobile SpaceX. It signals you're now connected via the space network.
Okay, I'm connected. I type my text message. Where does it go? Up to the satellite, obviously, but then what?
It's a sophisticated path. Your phone sends the data packet up to the satellite using that established LTE link. That satellite then has to get the data back down to Earth and into the regular internet. It might do this directly if it's currently over a Starlink ground station, one of their big gateway facilities.
What if it's not over a ground station, over the middle of the ocean, say?
That's where Starlink's inter-satellite links come in. The satellites can talk to each other using lasers. So your data might hop from your first satellite to another, maybe several others in the constellation, relaying across space until it reaches a satellite that is over a ground station.
Wow, a space-based mesh network.
Essentially, yes. Once the data hits a ground station, it's handed off via fiber optic cable into the partner carrier's core network, in this case, T-Mobile's. T-Mobile's system then authenticates you using your phone's SIM card or eSIM credentials, just like a normal connection, ensuring you're a valid subscriber. Then finally, your message hits the public internet and goes to its destination. Security and identity are maintained throughout that chain.
Okay, that pathway makes sense.
Yeah.
Now, the crucial part, like performance. We're in late 2025. Phase 1 is live. What are people actually experiencing? Let's manage expectations here. This isn't replacing my home fiber, is it?
Absolutely not. We need to be crystal clear about this. Phase 1 is about essential connectivity, not high-speed broadband. Early user reports and Starlink's own guidance point to data speeds typically in the range of 2 to 4 megabits per second, maybe a little higher in ideal conditions, maybe lower.
2 to 4 megabits. Okay,
Yeah.
that's usable for some things. What about latency, the delay?
Latency is also a key differentiator. While it's way better than old geostationary satellites, it's still significantly higher than terrestrial 4G or 5G. Users are seeing latency figures anywhere from 100 milliseconds up to maybe 500 milliseconds.
Definitely noticeable compared to the, 20, 50 milliseconds you might get on a good 5G connection.
Oh yeah, definitely noticeable. You wouldn't want to play a fast-paced online game over this initial DTC connection.
So what is it good for then, practical speaking? That 2 to 4 millips and 500 meters latency.
It's laser-focused on the essentials. Text messaging works perfectly fine, standard SMS, and also MMS, so sending pictures is possible, though it might be a bit slow. The absolute killer app, though, is emergency services. Sending an SOS, like 911 in the US, with your precise GPS location automatically included, that's huge for safety in remote areas.
That alone is a game changer for backcountry safety.
Absolutely. Beyond text's SOS, it can handle limited data apps, things like getting messages on WhatsApp or Signal, loading basic map data on Google Maps for navigation, maybe posting a quick update to X, formerly Twitter, or checking a weather forecast on AccuWeather. Those kinds of low-bandwidth tasks work.
But definitely not streaming video or big downloads.
No way. Try to watch Netflix, download a big podcast episode, update your apps, join a high-quality video call. It's just not going to be a good experience. The bandwidth isn't there in phase 1. It's about being connected, not consuming media.
Understood. What about the other major limitation people talk about, the line of sight requirement? If I'm in a city surrounded by tall buildings or deep in a dense forest, does D2C solve that kind of dead zone?
That's the primary physical limitation right now. These satellite signals, especially the relatively weak ones from a standard phone, need a fairly clear path to the sky. Dense tree canopy, deep canyons, tunnels, even just being inside a building with thick walls can block or significantly weaken the signal.
So the classic urban canyon dead zone in, say, downtown Manhattan, Starlink D2C phase 1 probably doesn't fix that.
Not reliably, no. If you step out into a park or a wider street with a clear view up, maybe, but deep inside buildings or surrounded by skyscrapers, it's unlikely to work well in this initial phase. The signals just aren't strong enough yet to penetrate heavy obstructions. That's a key problem. The next phase, powered by that big spectrum deal, aims to solve.
Okay, so phase 1 is amazing for the hiker, the sailor, the rural resident miles from a tower. But it's not yet the universal fix for every single dead spot, especially indoors or in dense urban areas.
That's a perfect summary. It conquers the remote dead zone first. But even with those limitations, the scale of this initial deployment is just mind-boggling. As of late 2025, the sources say there are over 650 satellites already in orbit equipped with this DTC hardware.
650 already.
Already. And that's just the start. They're launching more constantly. The plan is to ramp up dramatically towards a goal of potentially 15,000 DTC-capable satellites by 2027. The pace of infrastructure build-out is unlike anything we've ever seen in telecom.
Okay, that sets the technical stage really well. Let's pivot to the business side, the partnerships. Who's actually offering this service to consumers and where?
Right. Starlink made a strategic choice early on. Partner with existing mobile network operators, MNOs, rather than trying to sell directly to consumers initially. It makes sense to leverage the carrier's existing customer base, billing systems, and regulatory approvals.
And T-Mobile in the U.S. was the flagship partner.
They were. Launched back in July 2025. Their agreement covers a huge geographic area, essentially the entire continental U.S., plus Hawaii, Puerto Rico, and even parts of southern Alaska, where terrestrial coverage is spotty. We're talking roughly 500,000 square miles, where T-Mobile customers could potentially get a signal via satellite if the ground network isn't available.
That's a massive footprint. And you mentioned international partners, too.
Yes, the global rollout is key to the vision. 1NZ, formerly Vodafone New Zealand, was the very first international partner to launch. Given New Zealand's terrain, lots of mountains and remote coastlines, it's a perfect market for this.
Makes total sense.
Then KDDI in Japan came online shortly after, around August 2025. They were notable for being the first partner, according to the sources, to actually enable data services from the start, not just text and SOS.
Interesting. So variations in what the partners offer initially.
Exactly. And the pipeline is full. Starlink has publicly announced agreements or MOUs with carriers in over 40 countries. Think huge potential markets like India, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, countries across South America and Africa. These are mostly pending final regulatory approvals in each country, which can be complex, but the intention is clear. Go global. Fast.
And critical applications, too, like in Ukraine.
Yes, that's a significant one mentioned. An agreement is in place, with basic messaging services expected potentially by the end of 2025, and the aim for actual mobile broadband via satellite sometime in mid-2026 shows the geopolitical importance as well.
Okay, so the service is rolling out globally. Now, the question every listener has, is my phone going to work with this? Do I need the absolute latest model?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? The good news is compatibility is surprisingly broad, but there are nuances. The initial rollout supports over 60 different smartphone models, which is quite a lot.
So it's not just the brand new flagship.
Not exclusively, no. However, for the full experience in Phase 1, meaning reliable text, sending photos, MMS, and using those basic data apps we talked about, you generally need a more recent higher-end phone. The sources point to models like the iPhone 13 series up through the latest iPhone 17 series. For Android, it's the Google Pixel 10 series and recent Samsung Galaxy flagships, the S23 through S25 series, and the folding phones like the Z Flip 5 to 7 and Z Fold 5 to 7.
Okay, so mostly premium phones from the last couple of years for the full feature set. What if I have something a bit older, or maybe a mid-range or budget phone? Am I completely out of luck?
Not necessarily completely. Some older or less powerful models might still get partial support, specifically text-only connectivity, including that crucial SOS feature. The sources mention examples like the Pixel 9a, Google's budget line, the popular Samsung Galaxy A14, or even slightly older flagships like the Galaxy S21. These might be able to connect just for basic texting when no other signal is available.
So even older phones might get the safety net feature. That's good to know.
It is. But here's the really critical piece of advice for everyone. Keep your phone's software updated. This satellite connectivity relies heavily on the modem firmware, the low-level software that controls your phone's radios. If you're running old, outdated system software, your phone might not even have the instructions it needs to look for or properly connect to these Starlink DVC signals, even if the hardware is technically capable.
Ah, so it's not just the physical antenna, it's the software smarts telling the modem what to do. Good tip. Always install those system updates.
Absolutely. It's crucial for seamless operation as these networks evolve.
Okay, final piece on Phase 1 practicality, cost. How much does this potentially life-saving connectivity cost the average user?
T-Mobile set a pretty aggressive precedent in the U.S. For customers on their premium plans, like Go 5G Next or Plus, the Starlink D2C access is included for free.
Free? Wow.
Yeah, baked into the higher tiers.
Yeah.
For customers on their other plans, it's being offered as a relatively affordable add-on, somewhere around $10 per month.
$10 a month for that peace of mind? Seems reasonable.
It does. And globally, while the exact pricing structures vary by carrier and country, the general trend seems to be either bundling it into higher tier plans or offering it as a specific add-on for rural customers or those who frequently travel off-grid. They're positioning it based on the value of eliminating coverage gaps.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so Phase 1, live, focused on essential connectivity, broad but specific compatibility, affordable pricing, relies on partnerships, but limited by speed and line of sight. A fantastic start, but not the ultimate vision.
Precisely. It's the foundation. But the structure that's going to be built on top of it, the thing that enables true 5G speeds from space, that's all about Phase 2. And Phase 2 is powered by one thing, money, specifically $17 billion.
Right. Let's dive into that massive spectrum deal with EchoStar Corporation. This was announced September 8th, 2025. You called it transformative. Why?
Because it fundamentally changes Starlink's position in the market. It's not an exaggeration to call it one of the biggest, most strategic telecom deals of the decade. Starlink isn't just buying spectrum, they're buying autonomy. They're buying the regulatory right to operate their own global mobile network from space, potentially independent of carrier partners down the line.
Okay, unpack that. $17 billion is a staggering amount. What exactly did they get from EchoStar, which people might know better through its Dishish network or HughesNet brands?
They acquired EchoStar's treasure chest of mid-band spectrum licenses, specifically licenses in the 2 GHz range, covering frequencies known as AWS-4 and the H-block. Now, this spectrum was incredibly valuable, but EchoStar had struggled for years to actually build it out and utilize it effectively. It was essentially sitting dormant.
Mid-band spectrum. Why is that the Goldilocks zone, as people call it? Why is it so valuable compared to the PCS band they're using now with T-Mobile?
It's all about the physics of radio waves. Low-band spectrum, like 600, 700 millihertz, travels really far and penetrates buildings well, but doesn't have much capacity for high speeds. High-band spectrum, millimeter wave or milliband wave, like 28 gigahertz and up, has huge capacity for super fast speeds, but travels short distances and gets blocked by almost anything, leaves, windows, even rain.
Right.
Midband, that sweet spot around 2 gigahertz up to maybe 6 gigahertz, offers the best compromise. It provides good geographic coverage, much better than high band, and it has significantly more capacity for higher speeds than low band. Crucially for D2C, it also penetrates buildings much better than the 1.9 gigahertz PCS band they're currently using.
Ah, so that's how they plan to solve the indoor coverage problem we talked about in phase one. This new spectrum punches through walls better.
Exactly. If you want to deliver a true 5G-like experience from a satellite-reliable connectivity inside homes, offices, cars, you need spectrum with better penetration characteristics. This 2 gigahertz midband spectrum is absolutely key to achieving that. It's the missing piece for robust consumer-grade service.
Okay, the why makes sense. Now the how. How does a company, even SpaceX, finance a $17 billion acquisition like this? It wasn't all cash, was it?
No, it was a cleverly structured hybrid deal, leveraging the immense valuation of SpaceX itself. The total potential value is up to $17 billion. It breaks down like this. Up to $8.5 billion paid in cash, and up to $8.5 billion paid in SpaceX stock.
So EchoStar shareholders get a big chunk of SpaceX equity.
Potentially, yes,
Yeah.
giving them upside in Starlink's future success. On top of that, as part of the deal, SpaceX also agreed to cover about $2 billion worth of interest payments on EchoStar's significant debt load through the year 2027. It's an aggressive move, using their high-flying stock as currency to acquire a critical, tangible asset, the airwaves themselves.
So with this new, more capable mid-band spectrum in hand, Starlink can now design and deploy its next generation of satellites, the Gen 3 architecture, presumably. What kind of performance leap are we talking about once this is fully rolled out, targeting late 2027?
The leap is dramatic. This isn't just about slightly faster texts. This is about enabling full 4G and, critically, 5G capabilities directly from the satellite constellation. We're talking high-quality voice calls, VoLTE or ViNAR, reliable SMS/MMS, and true mobile broadband data.
What kind of speeds are they aiming for?
The targets mentioned in the sources are impressive for satellite. Potential peak speeds for individual users in the range of 50 to 100 megabits per second.
50 to 100 millipees from space. That's faster than a lot of people's wired home internet in rural areas.
It absolutely is. And just as importantly, they're targeting significantly lower latency than Phase 1. The goal is to get latency consistently under 100 milliseconds, potentially much lower in many scenarios. That starts to feel much closer to a terrestrial 5G experience.
That's a massive jump in capacity to them.
Huge. We're looking at potential throughput increases per satellite link, somewhere between 20 times and maybe even 100 times higher than the current Phase 1 system. This acquisition literally unlocks the bandwidth needed to turn Starlink from an emergency backup network into a genuine, competitive, space-borne cellular grid.
Okay, let's nail down the core strategic insight here. Buying spectrum gives them speed and indoor coverage. But you said the real prize is autonomy. Explain why owning these licenses is more important than just leasing T-Mobile spectrum.
Because owning the spectrum globally, or at least having the primary rights to it in many key markets via the EchoStar licenses, grants Starlink regulatory freedom. They are no longer solely dependent on negotiating complex country-by-country leasing deals and revenue-sharing agreements with incumbent carriers like T-Mobile, Rogers, KDDI, etc.
They control their own destiny, frequency-wise.
Exactly. It gives them the legal right to operate using these 2 gigahertz frequencies directly. This opens the door for Starlink to potentially bypass traditional carriers altogether in some markets, offering services directly to consumers or enterprises. It allows for truly seamless global roaming, where your phone just talks to the Starlink network anywhere in the world using Starlink's licensed frequencies without needing handshakes with local terrestrial partners everywhere.
So Starlink could essentially become its own global mobile network operator, but with its infrastructure in orbit instead of on towers.
That's the ultimate potential, yes.
Yeah.
And the EchoStar deal even includes a valuable stepping stone towards that. It includes the integration of Boost Mobile.
Ah, EchoStar's prepaid wireless brand.
Right. Boost Mobile has millions of existing subscribers in the U.S., primarily in the prepaid market. By acquiring EchoStar, Starlink potentially gets direct access to bundle its satellite connectivity into Boost Mobile plans. This isn't just a premium add-on anymore. It could make satellite coverage a standard feature for a huge segment of the market, driving mainstream adoption and putting pressure on competitors.
That's a very clever way to get immediate market access. Okay, timeline check. The deal was announced Sept 2025. Where does it stand legally, and when do we, as consumers, actually get to experience this 5100 Mbps service?
The deal is still pending final approval from the FCC, Federal Communications Commission in the U.S., which is the main regulatory body overseeing spectrum licenses. However, the outlook seems positive. The FCC has generally been supportive of efforts to increase competition and rural broadband access. And critically, EchoStar managed to meet a key regulatory deadline for building out some infrastructure using this spectrum just days before the deal was announced, which resolved a major potential roadblock.
So approval likely sometime in early 2026.
That's the general expectation, yes. Assuming that happens smoothly, Starlink can then kick deployment into high gear. The plan is to start launching the upgraded Gen 3 satellites, the ones carrying the new 2 GHz radios, beginning in early 2026. This relies heavily on SpaceX getting its massive Starship rocket fully operational, as Starship is needed to launch these larger, heavier satellites cost-effectively.
Makes sense. Launch starts early 2026, then testing.
Integration testing will likely run through mid-2026, ensuring the new satellites work seamlessly with the existing constellation and ground systems. And then the target for the commercial rollout of this full 4G, 5G satellite connectivity is late 2027.
Late 2027. Mark the calendars. That's the potential turning point for ubiquitous high-speed connectivity.
That's the target date when the concept of a true coverage dead zone really starts to dissolve.
Okay, so late 2027, Starlink aims to have this powerful 5G from space network lighting up. What does this mean for everyone else playing in this sandbox? Who are the competitors, and frankly, can anyone even catch up at this point?
Starlink has built a formidable, arguably insurmountable, lid primarily due to two factors: scale and vertical integration. The sheer number of satellites they already have, operational, over 650 DTC-capable ones now, and thousands more planned. No one is even close.
And the vertical integration.
That's a killer advantage. Starlink is SpaceX. They design the satellites, they build the satellites, and crucially, they launch their own satellites on their own rockets. Falcon 9 now, Starship soon. They don't pay exorbitant launch fees to third parties. This drastically cuts their deployment costs and lets them iterate and launch much, much faster than anyone else.
Right. Their biggest cost is internalized. So who are the other players trying to compete in this direct-to-smartphone space? AST Space Mobile comes up a lot.
AST Space Mobile is probably the most direct competitor aiming for broadband D2C. They have significant partnerships with major carriers like AT&T and Vodafone, and recently Verizon invested too. Their technology is different, using very large antennas unfolded in space. But their major handicap is scale and speed. As of late 2025, they've only launched a handful, maybe 5 test satellites.
5 versus Starlink's 650 clusters. Yeah, that's a gap.
It's a huge gap. They simply can't deploy fast enough because they rely on buying launches from others, and their satellite design is complex. The funding from AT&T and Verizon helps, but they are strategically far behind Starlink in terms of having an actual operational constellation.
What about Globalstar? Apple uses them for the iPhone's emergency SOS feature.
Globalstar is a different beast. It's an older, established LEO constellation, but it's fundamentally narrowband. It was designed for voice calls and very low data rate applications. The Apple SOS feature works because it sends tiny, compressed bursts of text data. Globalstar simply doesn't have the capacity or the technology to offer mobile broadband data or compete with Starlink or AST in that arena. It's a niche emergency service provider in this context.
Okay, so not a broadband competitor, and then there's OneWeb.
OneWeb, which is now merged with Eutelsat, is another major LEO constellation, but their focus is entirely different. They are targeting the enterprise, government, aviation, and maritime broadband markets. Think connecting airplanes, ships, remote businesses, not individual consumer smartphones directly. They aren't pursuing a direct-to-cell strategy like Starlink.
So in the D2C race, Starlink is effectively running laps around the competition right now.
Pretty much. They have the scale, the launch capability, and now with the EchoStar deal, the crucial mid-band spectrum for the next phase.
What does this overwhelming lead mean for the traditional giants, AT&T and Verizon? They're partnered with the slower AST Space Mobile. Are they going to be left behind if Starlink builds this ubiquitous global network first?
It puts immense pressure on them. Starlink potentially by late 2027 will be able to offer reasonably fast, reliable coverage in places where building terrestrial towers is economically impossible for AT&T or Verizon, vast rural areas, mountains, deserts, oceans.
Places their maps are currently blank.
Exactly. Customers increasingly expect seamless connectivity everywhere. If Starlink, perhaps via Boost Mobile initially, or even directly, can offer a plan that fills those gaps, while AT&T and Verizon still have huge holes in their coverage maps, it becomes an existential threat. It forces the incumbents into a tough position.
What are their options?
They likely have two paths. One, double down on partnerships with players like AST Space Mobile and hope they can scale up, which looks challenging. Two, swallow their pride and eventually partner with Starlink themselves, perhaps through wholesale agreements, to resell Starlink's satellite capacity to their own customers to plug those coverage gaps. The traditional model of competing solely on regional terrestrial network buildouts is being fundamentally challenged by this global space-based overlay.
Fascinating dynamic. It really could reshape the entire telecom landscape. Now, beyond the commercial competition, what are the bigger geopolitical ripples here? A single U.S. company building a global communication backbone.
The implications are huge and complex. On one level, it's a massive win for U.S. technological leadership. Starlink's dominance in LEO broadband and GTC provides a powerful counterweight to state-backed initiatives, particularly from China, like China SatNet, and equipment providers like Huawei, who aim to dominate global network infrastructure. It reinforces the U.S. position in the next generation of communication tech.
But it also raises questions about control and sovereignty, doesn't it?
Absolutely. This network inherently ignores national borders. Starlink owning and operating global spectrum licenses raises thorny questions for national regulators. How do they manage interference? How do they ensure lawful access when needed? Does a private U.S. company now control the essential communication infrastructure overlying their sovereign territory?
And the security angle. If my data goes phone, satellite, VANSA, ground station, internet, potentially bypassing local networks.
That's the other big question. Could end-to-end encrypted communication routed entirely through the Starlink satellite mesh effectively bypass traditional national monitoring and surveillance systems that rely on tapping into terrestrial fiber and carrier networks? It presents a significant challenge to existing intelligence gathering and law enforcement frameworks. This intersection of private global infrastructure and national security is going to be a major policy battleground for years to come.
A truly global network raises global governance questions. Okay, we've covered the tech, the money, the competition, the geopolitics. Now let's jump into the really mind-bending part, phase 3. What happens when this planetary connectivity from Starlink becomes truly seamless by 2027, and it merges with the accelerating power of artificial intelligence? The sources suggest this could mean the end of screens.
This is where things get really profound. You have to understand the fundamental design philosophy of the smartphone you use today. It is, in many ways, a device built around failure and scarcity.
Failure and scarcity, how so?
It's designed assuming the network won't always be there. That's why we have offline modes, apps that cache data locally, complex radios, constantly searching for Wi-Fi, then 5G, then 4G, trying to find the best available connection. Because perfect connectivity is scarce, the whole user experience is shaped by managing unreliability.
Okay, I see that. We're always managing the connection.
But what happens when that fundamental assumption flips? What happens when, by late 2027 or shortly after, you have persistent, reasonably fast, low-latency connectivity everywhere on the planet, courtesy of Starlink's global grid?
The scarcity disappears.
Exactly. The network is just there,
Yeah.
like oxygen. And when that happens, the smartphone's identity has to change. It stops being a mobile device defined by its struggle to stay connected, and it starts becoming something else, a seamless, always-on node in a planetary neural network.
A node in a network. So, if connectivity is solved, where do the design challenges shift? What becomes the new bottleneck?
The bottlenecks immediately become power management, thermal performance, and contextual awareness. Keeping a phone constantly talking to satellites, even relatively nearby LEO satellites, takes significantly more power than chatting with a cell tower a mile away. Tracking moving satellites, processing those signals, it generates heat.
So battery life becomes even more critical.
Hugely critical. Future devices will need incredibly sophisticated AI-driven power management. The system needs to understand your context. Are you sitting still reading? Maybe power down the satellite radio significantly, or are you walking down the street? Power up predictively, anticipating handovers between satellites. Are you on a plane? optimized for that specific high-speed, high-altitude scenario. The AI needs to manage the radio intelligently, waking it only when truly needed based on context, location, and predicted user behavior.
And the antennas inside the phone need to evolve too, beyond just supporting the new frequencies.
Absolutely. To maintain seamless connectivity as satellites whiz overhead, future phones will likely need more advanced internal antenna systems. Think multi-beam, phased array microantennas built right into the device chassis. These could potentially track and communicate with multiple Starlink satellites simultaneously, ensuring make-before-break handovers so your data stream never drops.
Wow, phased arrays in the phone itself. And what about identity? You mentioned the SIM card might disappear.
It seems likely. The physical SIM card is kind of an artifact of the old carrier-centric model. In a world of global, satellite-first connectivity, potentially direct from Starlink, identity could shift towards more secure, end-to-end encrypted methods tied to the device hardware and possibly decentralized identity protocols. Your subscription might be cryptographically linked to your device or a secure digital identity rather than a removable piece of plastic.
Okay, so the hardware gets smarter about power and antennas, but the really radical shift you mentioned is the interface. If I'm always connected, why do I need to pull out this rectangle and stare at it all the time?
Precisely. The screen, the graphical user interface. It's largely a product of that disconnected or intermittently connected past. It's how we interact with locally stored apps and data. But if the network is always on and AI is readily available, the screen starts to recede. The primary interface shifts towards something more natural, more immediate.
Okay.
Voice, gestures, context, ambient intelligence.
Ambient intelligence. This sounds like what the sources call intent-driven computing. Can you give us a practical example? How does that feel different for a user?
Okay, imagine today you land in a new city. You pull out your phone, unlock it. Find your airline app for the gate. Find your hotel app for the address and check-in code. Search for a map app for directions. Look for a restaurant app. You're constantly switching between these siloed applications, manually feeding them information.
Right, app hopping.
Now, imagine the intent-driven future. You land,
Hmm?
maybe you just speak into your earbud, or maybe the system already knows your context. You simply state your intent. Okay, I've landed. Get me to my hotel, check me in, and find a quiet place nearby for dinner in about an hour.
And the AI just figures it out.
The AI understands the goal. It doesn't need you to open specific apps. The underlying AI orchestrator accesses your flight info, confirms landing, pulls your hotel reservation, handles the mobile check-in, hails the right kind of transport via your preferred service, checks your calendar, finds restaurants matching your preferences, quiet, maybe dietary needs, checks real-time availability, and presents you with options, or just makes the booking. It might give you walking directions via subtle audio cues in your earbud or an AR overlay in your glasses. The apps become invisible plumbing. The intent is the interface.
That requires a different kind of processing, doesn't it? Not just cloud AI.
Absolutely. This relies heavily on powerful edge AI. You need sophisticated neural processing units, NPUs, right there in your device, whether it's a phone, earbuds, glasses, to handle a lot of the immediate contextual understanding, sensor fusion, and local reasoning. This preserves privacy, reduces latency, and saves battery and satellite bandwidth by only reaching out to the cloud for complex queries or information retrieval that can't be handled locally. The OS itself becomes AI first, adapting to your goals, not forcing you into its structure.
So this is the ultimate convergence. Starlink provides the ubiquitous low-latency network, the planetary nervous system. AI provides the distributed intelligence and intent understanding, the cognitive layer.
That's the vision.
Yeah.
Starlink is the infrastructure, AI is the cognition.
What are the biggest human-level outcomes of that merger?
They're potentially transformative. First, as we said, it makes offline effectively impossible, dramatically shrinking the digital divide and bringing billions into the global digital economy. Second, it enables truly seamless real-time communication and collaboration across language barriers. Imagine instant, natural-sounding translation woven into every conversation because the low latency and AI allow for it. Cultural and linguistic silos start to dissolve.
Wow.
And third, on a grander scale, every connected device, billions of them, becomes part of this sensing, processing, Earth-scale neural web. It's a step towards a kind of planetary consciousness, a unified cognitive system enabled by this infrastructure.
That's a huge concept. If the phone's interface is receding and the intelligence is becoming ambient and distributed, what actually replaces the smartphone as the central device in our lives? Does the rectangle just vanish?
The sources suggest the device, as a single monolithic object, essentially dissolves into the environment. The components, the sensors, the radios, the processing, the interface points get distributed. The phone isn't the object in your hand anymore. It's the distributed intelligence that follows you and adapts to your context.
Distributed how? Like different pieces of hardware working together.
Exactly. You'll rely on a constellation of wearable interfaces. Maybe smart earbuds become your primary audio interface, providing constant contextual AI assistance and communication. AR glasses overlay relevant digital information onto your view of the real world, driven by AI understanding your intent. Smart wristbands provide haptic feedback, monitor biometrics that feed the AI's contextual awareness, and maybe handle secure authentication.
So the phone is in my ear, on my eyes, on my wrist, interacting seamlessly.
Yes, the intelligence is pervasive, the interface is ambient, the world itself becomes the display, augmented by AI, all connected seamlessly by the Starlink backbone.
It's a radical shift from the device-centric world we live in now. Let's bring this back to Earth for a moment. We talked about the $17 billion deal. What's the ultimate economic prize here? Connecting everyone. What's that worth?
The numbers are staggering. This isn't just about selling more phones or data plans. This is about fundamentally unlocking economic potential. Estimates suggest there are still around 2.6 billion people globally who are unserved or severely underserved by modern internet connectivity.
Billions left out of the digital economy.
Billions. Bringing them online with reliable, affordable satellite internet, which Starlink is positioned to do, could have a monumental impact. Analysts cited in the sources estimate this universal connectivity could add anywhere from $2 trillion to $4 trillion to the global GDP by 2035.
$2 to $4 trillion. How?
Through countless avenues. Increased productivity in agriculture via connected sensors and automation. Access to online education and remote work opportunities in previously isolated areas. Enabling telehealth. Creating entirely new digital markets and services tailored to newly connected populations, reducing transaction costs. It's about integrating the entire planet into the digital economic fabric.
That really puts the scale of this transformation into perspective. It's not just a tech upgrade, it's potentially a global economic engine.
And it forces those incumbent carriers, as we discussed, to adapt or become marginalized, possibly shifting from infrastructure owners to becoming service resellers riding on top of this global Starlink backbone.
Okay, let's try to wrap this all together. We've gone from the initial D2C rollout through the massive Spectrum deal into AI, ambient interfaces, and trillions in economic impact. What's the single biggest takeaway for someone listening to this, trying to grasp the core change?
I think the core message is this. Starlink isn't really building a better phone. It's building a fundamentally different planet, one where the limitations that defined phones and networks for decades are simply evaporating. It's making the devices we already own, and the ones coming next, essentially limitless in their reach.
We're moving from a world of patchy, fragmented coverage owned by different companies in different countries
To a world increasingly defined by a single, borderless, space-based network that covers virtually everywhere. Concepts like roaming charges, coverage maps, dead zones, they become historical artifacts by the end of this decade. Certainly by the early 2030s.
It's an incredible technological achievement, but you also raise the paradox, the potential downside.
Yes, you have to acknowledge the flip side.
Sure.
This phenomenal leap in connectivity shrinking the digital divide also represents an unprecedented centralization of critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
If one private company, SpaceX Starlink, effectively controls the primary communication layer for much of the planet,
The wire to the sky.
the ultimate wire to the sky, that raises enormous questions about neutrality, censorship, access, pricing, and national sovereignty. The engineering problems are being solved at breathtaking speed. The governance and ethical challenges, we're just beginning to grapple with those. That's the conversation that needs to happen alongside the technological rollout.
A crucial point. Okay, as we finish, let's leave our listeners with that final provocative thought from the sources. We've talked about planetary scale, but where does this architecture ultimately lead?
When you look at the design of Starlink, the intersatellite laser links, the planned scale, the robustness, you have to remember SpaceX's ultimate goal. Elon Musk has been very clear. SpaceX exists to make humanity multiplanetary,
Meaning Mars.
meaning Mars and beyond. The sources explicitly state that the Starlink architecture being deployed around Earth right now is designed from the ground up to be extendable. The plan is to deploy a similar constellation around Mars to create an interplanetary network.
So the system connecting my phone in Kansas could be the same system connecting a researcher on Mars.
Fundamentally, yes. If the same AI-driven, satellite-based network architecture functions seamlessly, whether you're in Kathmandu, cruising over the Pacific, or standing on a research base in a Martian crater, then what we are building today isn't just a global internet. It's the blueprint, the working prototype for a true solar system scale internet.
That reframes everything. This isn't just about ending dead zones on Earth.
It's the foundational infrastructure for human expansion, communication, and maybe even consciousness across space. This moment right now, with these satellites going up and this spectrum being activated, it really is the birth of the thinking planet and perhaps the seeds of a thinking solar system.
A truly mind-expanding and thought to end on. Thank you for that incredible deep dive.
Thank you. It's a remarkable time to be watching this unfold.